In May 2025, the Trump administration quietly reduced tariffs on Chinese imports, bringing them down to around 80% of their original levels. This wasn't some minor technical adjustment. This was a broad policy retreat, affecting hundreds of goods across multiple sectors. And it raises an unavoidable question. If the tariff war was working, why back off now? Today on Macro Matters, we're breaking down the numbers, the impact, and what this move says about the long-term failure of Trump's trade war strategy. On May 2nd, 2025, the U.S. Trade Representative released a formal update confirming a 20% reduction in tariffs on a wide array of Chinese imports. Affected goods include semiconductors, consumer electronics, industrial machinery, rare earth components, and even household appliances. There was no press conference, no public pivot, just a quiet policy walkback embedded in an administrative release. The stated reason? To ease supply chain pressures and support U.S. manufacturing competitiveness amid ongoing global inflation concerns. In simpler terms, the tariffs didn't do what they were supposed to do, and now they're being quietly reduced to limit further damage. Let's step back for context. Trump launched the tariff war in 2018, imposing duties on over $350 billion worth of Chinese goods. The goals were loud and clear. Punish China for unfair trade practices. Shrink the U.S.-China trade deficit. Bring manufacturing back to American soil. But here's what happened instead. U.S. companies bore the majority of the costs. Consumer prices went up. American farmers lost export markets and relied on subsidies. And the trade deficit with China? It never meaningfully declined. In fact, by 2024, it had increased again. The tariff war didn't bring industry back. It brought higher costs and global uncertainty. So why the rollback in May 2025? Simple. The tariffs are now doing more harm than good. U.S. manufacturers relying on Chinese parts are facing margin pressure. Consumer electronics remain inflated in price, and key industries like energy tech, automotive, and aerospace need smoother supply chains to stay competitive. This isn't about politics, it's about economics. Washington insiders know the data is damning. Manufacturing activity has flattened. Domestic inflation remains sticky. Business sentiment has soured due to ongoing cost pressures. Cutting tariffs is the fastest way to inject relief into the system, without having to overhaul policy in full view of the public. Meanwhile, what has China done since 2018? They've adapted, yet aggressively. They've expanded trade with Southeast Asia and Europe. They've invested in domestic production of sensitive tech, and they've strategically reduced dependence on the U.S. market. In effect, the tariff war forced China to accelerate economic reforms and strengthen resilience. So while the U.S. paid more for imports and American exporters lost market share, China used the pressure as motivation to diversify. That's not exactly what you'd call a strategic win for the United States. As someone who follows macroeconomics and trade policy closely, here's my take. Tariffs can be useful tools when used with precision as part of a broader strategy. But Trump's tariff war wasn't strategic. It was blunt, reactionary, and ultimately self-defeating. Reducing tariffs now is the right move economically, but it's also an undeniable sign that the policy failed in its original goals. You don't walk back a winning hand. You only retreat when the costs become too high to ignore. So, as we look at the tariff rollback of May 2025, remember this: trade wars are easy to start, hard to win, and even harder to quietly undo without admitting defeat. We'll keep tracking the long-term fallout of this policy on Macro Matters, from global supply chains to domestic manufacturing trends. If this shift has affected your business or industry, let me know in the comments. And as always, like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more deep dives from Macro Matters. Thanks for watching. I'm Victor, and this is Macro Matters.